Thank you, and welcome everybody also from my side. I'm just starting to share my screen. You should see it by now. And before I start, I just want to say I'm from Teltow at the moment, so hello to Stahnsdorf, whoever that was. This is as a side note. What I want to do is to give you a very, very brief overview of what we're doing with AI at SAP and where the innovation is coming from. I guess that, yeah, it's not going into too much depth, but I was betting on questions that are coming in case you're interested in understanding more about the details. So, why is it not working? This way. So when we look at artificial intelligence at SAP, we basically see, yeah, three huge building blocks. One is the automation of processes, for example, in manufacturing, like in predictive maintenance, Internet of Things, machine to machine. We're thinking about process automation in terms of what are the processes within the companies that are running. So, for example, you're automating your HR process, automating workflow approvals, automating, yeah, your purchasing. And then, of course, the third area which we're looking at is user experience. And I guess that, yeah, you're maybe missing the analytics part. That's also part of the process automation here. It's when you're retrieving or trying to automatically retrieve interesting insights into your from your business processes. Okay. Overall, what SAP does, maybe that's just a very, very high level view on it, is we're providing technology. It's called the SAP Business Technology Platform right now, but the name is changing from time to time. We're providing applications that are built on top of these technologies. For example, for HR, for enterprise resource planning, for logistics, for industry-specific solutions. And then, of course, across those, there are business processes that are implemented that are crossing these applications, and we are running business networks on top of that. But I think it's going too far to explain how this all connects. Let's rather look into how we look at the AI market. So when you think about AI, or many people usually look into the technology side of things, and the way we have started at SAP was a bit different. We were looking at where and how to embed AI into applications. And I think when you look into what startups are doing, how the business run, this is actually the part where there's more, let's say, money, where there's also more growth, where the potential is bigger than on the technology side. I could also show you a technology view on this, but I wanted to keep it concise. So looking at how do AI apps are growing is basically what you're seeing here. And then for a company like SAP, that's an apps company. It's quite simple why you want to invest into AI. It's non-AI apps are shrinking, AI apps or apps with AI in it are growing. That's very simple equation on which side you want to be, what you want to invest into. So what we're doing on the development side at SAP is to work in a so-called AI factory. And what AI factory is about is we have a technology unit. It's called AI Foundation. That's the lowest part, and that's what I'm responsible for at SAP. So I'm leading the development unit that is building the AI Foundation, that's building platform components based on open source components that are fulfilling specific SAP requirements, that are integrated, that are doing the security handshakes, the user management, access control, and so on and so forth to these technologies. This is the base of this. Then we're building AI functions and data and maintaining data assets. These are models that we're creating for example, for image classification, for OCR, or for other jobs that we want to reuse across different applications. And then on top of that, we're developing together with these solution teams that you have seen or seen highlighted on the previous slide. We're building application after application, or better, we're embedding AI into existing application. That's, I think, the more correct way to think about it. So, for example, we're building together with the core finance team an application that is matching incoming payments with outgoing, what is it called in English? Oh God, I missed the word. Anyway, so Rechnung is the German word. Or you're basically having incoming support messages. You have trained a model that is then mapping those support messages to the respective unit that is then taking care of this. All these components there were building together with the different, for example, HR team or the finance team or whatever development team, embedding those into the applications. That's the development side of things. And of course, we're working together with HR, with sales, with commercial, legal, and so on and so forth. When we think about innovation, there's a second part of or a smaller team within SAP or a unit that is doing innovation at SAP. Is called Innovation Center. What they're doing is that they're looking at, as you can see here, highlighted emerging technologies that are representing massive disruption or significantly unlock potentials for SAP. And AI was one of the topics that we were driving as part of the Innovation Center. So we are a graduate, my team is a graduate of this Innovation Center as well. However, there's still ongoing innovation also besides what was happening on the development side in this Innovation Center. And here you can see 3 examples. This is a slide that I sneaked from them, and you see that from the 6 areas that they're publicly talking about, there are more things that they're doing, but the 6 areas that they're publicly talking about, 3 are dealing with AI. So they're looking into trustworthy AI, having prototypes and projects there, secure foundations. So that's a security related topic. And then autonomous enterprise, it's more on the process side, as I explained. And besides that, we also have a research team or dedicated research efforts in SAP that are looking into AI. I think it's it's not so important to look into this. I think this is just an overview slide, but what you see here is that what we're trying to do is to create a triangle between the SAP development side, the academic partners, and our own research organization. This is basically what we're doing here. And then there are some research areas that we're tackling. As you can see here, it all is somehow related to, or as you could guess, they're all somehow related to what we need to do at SAP. So what's our own interest? For example, privacy, few-shot learning, lifelong learning, efficient deep learning. I think these are all, I guess, reasonable and understandable areas that you would look into if you're a software company selling to other companies. I think you can also see where we see are big investment areas in general or research challenges ahead. For example, if you look into efficient deep learning and learning with few data, what you could derive from that is that we have issues with training models where customers don't have collections of 100 years of data, or where it's not consumer data, where it's easy to collect those data. So we try to do transfer learning or learning with minimal supervision, and try to be as efficient as possible. And with that, I already want to conclude. I mean, if you have questions, I can tell you more about how we do innovation on the development side, on the innovation center, and of course also on the research side, which by coincidence I'm leading at the moment as well. But obviously, yeah, if you're not interested, we can talk about something else. And with that, I would hand back to Juri.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. Super interesting. Andreas, we also have a few questions here. I can share the screen.
Yeah, we have one question so far. So please, everyone, if you want to ask your questions, please use the Slido platform. Okay, so we now have two questions. And maybe I start with the earliest one. Question for SAP: which platform are you using to streamline the data science and machine learning process?
So as I said, we're building our own platform, but when you say data science and machine learning process, I think we have to separate the different personas. So we're dominantly focusing on the development and then on the operations part of this, and relying on the data science tooling that our data scientists want to use. So we're supporting, of course, something like Jupyter Lab or whatever other tooling they're using. We're hosting that also centrally where it makes sense. But what SAP is more interested in is to, let's say, standardize the training and then also the inference activities. So if you do something for as a project for one customer, that's fine. But what we're trying to do is to come up with application areas where the next customer who has a similar data set gets onboarded automatically. And then you can automatically run a training for this customer, do the validation, and then port that model that has been generated into production, link that to the application logic so that the inference then is also able to happen automatically or on request of a user. And this part is, I would say, to a large extent based off open source components. So we're using Docker, Kubernetes, we're supporting TensorFlow and other Python-based libraries. But it's basically, stitched together by us. And that would be the hopefully short enough answer.
Thank you. There's a second one. How would SAP decide on use cases for AI within industries?
Yeah, so at SAP we have a definition of industries that is that are things that are not the same for everything. So we separate between, let's say, what we call line of business. So HR, for example, would be a line of business. And that's the reason for that is it's happening, that is tackled the same way in all the industries. And I guess that industries may refer to something like a specific industry, or may also refer to something as generic as HR. I don't know. But let me try to answer it in the generic fashion, and I hope I'm guessing right. What we're doing is basically to look at where is the biggest automation potential. So we're looking together with our customer base into their business processes. It's we're also building up automation in that area, and see how many manual effort is related to a certain business process step that people are conducting. For example, a matching step or a whatever decision-making step. And then we also look into how feasible is it to build something up using AI, and that somehow provides you with a simple 2x2, and then you go from most people or many people are using it. It's the easiest to automate that, and then we're starting there. But this is a decentralized process. So all the application units, like in HR, like in finance, like in the manufacturing industry, they have their own 2x2. So they're all looking into how are they evolving their portfolio. And then we're collaborating in this AI factory approach with them. We're supporting them with building the models. We're supporting them with running those. But the use cases, they are brought by these individual industries or line of business teams. And they all have their portfolio process, because they're not only investing in AI, but obviously it's the AI investments are part of an overall portfolio process there. But maybe interesting for this round, that there's also sometimes maybe often the case that there's an interesting idea and we're not following up. And here what we're trying to do is to find partners that are supporting this and then building extensions to SAP products. So what we're trying to do is to focus on those areas where there's standardization potential, everywhere where we believe that it's for a huge company like SAP, it's not efficient to build a solution like that, or to build an extension like that. Then we're trying to identify partners and opening it up then for co-innovation with our customers. That's the way we're looking at that.
Does this also partly already answers the question, which is the last one on the screen currently? What is the SAP position regarding other players like 09, Blue Yonder, SFDC? I think it was this typo here. Is this competition or is there cooperation?
It's with these big players, it's always competition, right? So you're meeting them when you're addressing your customers. But I think that with most of these players, we have big corporations, and we are usually not competing in when we're meeting with customers. And the reason for that is that SAP has a, let's say, unique position automating and creating an AI innovation in our own portfolio. So it's very hard for others to go against that. At the same time, we're leaving a lot of open space for customer-led co-innovation or for partner-led co-innovation in the space. And usually what is happening then is that it's determined of whether this is something where SAP is investing. Then in some areas it becomes competition, but in most areas it's very clear whether it's a standardized product or it becomes part of a standard feature of a product, or it's something that the partners are going to address. And then there's more competition around in the SAP ecosystem. There, of course, it's not just one partner, it's usually more partners that are offering similar services or extensions.
And maybe as a question that fits nicely, that would be, is SAP allowing their customers to develop any AI machine learning in their own SAP environments?
Yes, and what we're doing is not only to allow our customers, but also our partners to do that. The technology foundation that I'm responsible for is also a product that we're selling. And what we're selling is basically since it's a cloud product, we're selling it at a price where we're covering our infrastructure costs. So we're not trying to make profit of that. And the idea is exactly that, to allow our customers and our partners to do innovation on top of the same technology. And the reason for that is that we're, as I explained, focusing mostly on things like integration, like security, like compliance issues in terms of how do you connect the lifecycle of a model that you train to the software lifecycle of the bigger solution that you're integrating in. So these aspects is what we're putting our efforts in, and that's something that partners and customers would have to deal with on their own if they would want to build these extensions. So we're basically providing open source components at the heart of it, but the magic is in making that seamlessly integratable or usable in order to build up extensions.
So maybe also in this context, of course, the question about the safety of the customer data arises. So how do you deal with that? Does the customer data ever leave their infrastructure? Do you see that, or how does it work?
Depends. So for a cloud solution, it depends on, I mean, first of all, we have a lot of cloud customers as well, right? And there it's it's hard to say what does it mean it leaves the customer. What I can say is that if a customer is signing up for our platform offering, they're the only ones who have access to data. So we're using encryption at rest. We're not able to log into their platform instance, and we're not allowed to do that except for if the customer grants us or the privileges for this. There's obviously there are customers of ours that are hesitant to move to the cloud. And then we find on-prem solutions for them. And for these on-premise solutions, obviously, we also don't have access to. But then we also are not able to give the same support and to like fulfill our service level than we would do in the cloud, because we're because of this limited access and limited capacity to then upgrade or maintain whatever is running in customer premises.
Okay, looking at the time, maybe the last question. What are the and coming back to what you were talking earlier about, what are the volumes you think of? Sorry, what are the volumes you think of when talking about efficient learning?
I think that this largely depends on the use case. So if you go to if you think about some visual transfer learning, if the concepts are very close to each other, I think a couple hundred data points may be enough to learn these adjacent concepts. But you have other areas where efficient would be if you use whatever the customer has, and it could be, I don't know, in some clustering activities or object detection cases for the customer, where the objects that you want to detect, for example, in spare part recognition, these objects often they look very, very similar, and it's hard to say what is efficient. We're just trying to push down the demand for it as much as possible. And now I have to admit I'm also not an expert in this field, despite managing some of the people that are. So if that's interesting, we can have a follow-up, and I can connect you to the right people. But in general, I would say it's not that we're giving us clear goals like we want to solve everything with a couple of hundred images, or with, I don't know, 200 utterances or 20 documents. I think it depends on the use case.
Okay, before I hand over to Juri, I would still like to ask the last question, because that was the first question that came also into my mind. Because we at DFKI, we're about 1,000 people dealing with AI research. That makes us still one of the biggest non-profit AI research centers in Europe, at least. So what's the figure? I mean, how many people are dealing with AI, specifically AI research at SAP?
Yeah, I cannot answer this question, unfortunately.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that we're listed on the stock market. If I would give out this information, we would have to publish that to every to every stockholder. So sorry for that, but maybe you can search on LinkedIn and then
get a rough idea. Okay.
Get a rough idea. But I would say it's a pyramid. So I mean, there's development. It's called R&D. So there's research in this as well. Then there's the innovation center, and then there are the researchers. And yeah, you can think of it as a pyramid, but I cannot tell you what's the magnitude of that. Sorry for that.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Thanks again. And now I will hand over to Juri. You're mute. You're still mute.
Yes, and I found the button to unmute myself. So thanks so much, and for everybody involved in having maybe more questions. So after this, those talks, we're gonna plan to move over to WonderMe and then have a kind of a networking session, and then you can actually grab Sebastian and ask some more questions. Same to me, of course, and then Rasmus after me. So with that, thanks so much, Sebastian. And then, yeah, starting to talk about our topic today. I mean, we're as Taival organizing AI Monday since a while, but rarely make the attempt to actually present something of our own. But this time I thought I'm gonna need to share something that I found very interesting, and specifically as the topic is how to drive innovation. I thought this might make sense to share again, right? And then it's about the AI design sprint. We as Taival, we're kind of an expert group of people providing different type of services and consulting to our clients, specifically in my role to retail clients. And one of the, of course, emerging questions is, okay, there's this cumbersome process which requires lots of workforce and labor and time, or it's maybe not super precise, and there's a lot of issues when you ask the experts. And of course, with machine learning and AI coming more and more as a topic, people understand and know about what it could be solving. The question also comes up, could we use machine learning in some way in order to solve this? And usually, there's two sides about it. Then there's people like maybe Sebastian and specifically Rasmus and his team. So people that are really kind of smart about AI and they know how things work. And then on the other side, you have the domain expert, we call them. These are the experts that know their processes inside out. Let's take the HR department. They know exactly how to do recruiting and how to collect the quarterly or monthly or annual feedback rounds and do the promotion stuff. So, but if you ask somebody from the HR department around, what's machine learning, how would you want to use that in your processes? You probably get a lot of questions around, okay, how can it help to me, right? And this is exactly this bridge that we as consultants sometimes get asked, but we also ask ourselves, it's like, how can we get smarter around answering that question, starting from what's AI or machine learning all about, and how can they actually help in this specific process by bringing the problems that you have as kind of as a starting point, right? And that's where the AI design sprint starts, because there's certainly different ways to answer this question. And I myself also attended some painful brainstorming sessions around can we use machine learning, and then there was an hour-long discussion around what could be done, which did, of course, not result in much of a progress there. And then the AI design sprint is actually a method that facilitates that process quite a bit, and I'm talking about that in a second. I'm not sure if people are familiar with design sprint, but certainly there is the Google design sprint, which is, if you're not familiar with, a phenomenal way of getting the right people into a room, and then in a very structured, very quite tightly defined procedure to solve a very precise business problem in 5 days. And meaning on the first day, you still decide on what's exactly the business problem you want to solve. And on the last day, you actually have actual users testing a prototype of the problem that you just solved within the last couple of days. And of course, that sounds unbelievable, but there's a nice book, there's lots of video coverage on this one. And if you haven't used it, I can strongly suggest looking into Google Design Sprints, because it's a method that is very powerful in solving problems. And what our friends from from Copenhagen, 33A is the company, what they did is they actually took this process and applied it to the question that I just raised. You know, how can I use AI or machine learning in my processes and automated processes? And that's what I wanted to share with you today. It works pretty much as the design sprint methodology. It could be done in a room with lots of post-its, and you see some colorful cards, which I share in a second. But since we are in a setup right now, which is not allowing face-to-face meetings, of course, you can also do that using a Miro board, for example, which I won't show you today, but it takes too much time. But if you're interested, I can definitely walk you through and take some more time on how to do that. I just give you a short glimpse today on what is the AI design sprint. So how do I get to the next slide here? So let's get to the concept in itself very quickly, right? So first of all, what's the stages of an AI project? You first start to need to kind of look into what's the AI concept you want to solve, like what's the business process, how do you change the process, where do you adopt technology, and And then, of course, in the second phase, you then start in getting into development and implementation, which, by the way, is also not that super easy. As you see, that the majority of the work is actually sitting in that gray box. But we're covering only that blue box because the actual development and implementation happens once you've tested and prototyped the AI concept. AI design sprints are focusing on a few things, right? So one is, just imagine that picture of the HR person that is kind of asked, how can ML or machine learning help me? Well, usually those people aren't sort of familiar with technology and their spectrum of possibilities. So the AI design sprint covers that part. So we explain to people that are not knowledgeable around machine learning what's machine learning possible to do. The team also identifies then the potential in the organization. So where to focus on, because there's lots of potential, right? And somebody said the week 85% of all the processes in a company could actually be supported by machine learning in some way, which is super powerful. Then you're gonna develop an AI solution concept as a team, and then you also kind of look into how to make this happen, right? So what's the cost, what's the timeline, what data do you need, what's the strategy around this, and so you cover that as well. There's different areas you could actually use that design sprint, and I'm only covering the process automation today, but just to name at least the guys from 33A, which developed this approach, also have specific frameworks or methodologies developed just for example, developing a chatbot, or kind of if you look into product development or a new product service development, and then there's also specific canvases that you can use to that. Also on a higher level, so if you want to develop an understanding with your leadership or board members around where to actually focus on machine learning efforts within your company, there is that's also possible to do with that group. Getting into more details. So this is the 5 steps that you usually do when you follow the AI design sprint. It starts with framing. I'm coming to that in a second. You're gonna develop the concept in itself. Of course, you're gonna need to do some kind of a tech check. I will cover this only briefly, but of course, you should not do that without an AI expert, kind of an engineer that's able to actually kind of gauge whether this is actually possible or not. And finally, you're going to create some kind of a presentation where you kind of summarize the solution, and then you get into prototyping, which is the last step. And then you're going to test this concept, of course. getting into the framing part. And I like this picture a lot because it, you know, that's the result of the framing, right? So if you look at an HR department again, right, there's different processes that happen in such a department. And while this, you know, there's personal planning here, there's recruiting, there's onboarding, there is professional development, there's you know, there's offboarding and so forth, right? So different processes that you usually have in a department. And then there's software behind that those people are using. And so what you do in a framing session, you see those colorful colors here, which I'm explaining in a second. You try to understand, okay, which of those multiple processes that you have is actually the one that is causing you lots of issues in terms of, you know, work, you know, lots of work, maybe manual work, people doing tedious task to do something, to push kind of a you know, a certain task from A to B, which maybe could be automized, or it's maybe very unprecise because you need to look into lots of data, and then you do maybe even kind of a human judgment, and which, you know, specifically in HR departments might be, you know, you want to maybe have more analytic perspective. So what I'm trying to say is there's multiple problems involved, and you need to talk to the domain expert, the guys that are doing that job day in, day out, to kind of lift that up and to kind of understand, okay, which process do I need to actually look into in order to potentially apply a machine learning or AI. And then in the next step, you take those cards, and I'm holding that into the camera right now. So if you see my screen, that's part of this AI design sprint materials that you would use and get if you're gonna take into, if you start using the AI design sprint methodology, and you take those cards, and every card, and I'm explaining that in a second, is kind of explaining one AI use case, one technical use case that you could use AI for. And within this framing, you realize then quickly, okay, which process you want to focus on in the design, right? So once you've done that one, and you understand, okay, I'm gonna focus on the recruiting part, then you take the relevant experts and domain experts from that process into a room, and then you start working on the actual concept to apply machine learning and technology. And that happens in the following step, right? So first of all, you document that process very precisely, because, and that's usually not something that you can take off the shelf, right? So you need to work with the team that currently runs that process, whether there is maybe there is a process documentation, but usually that's not always existing. So you're going to start kind of jotting down the process, or get the process experts into the room trying to explain that process, so everybody in the room understands this process. And then, as part of, you know, certain processes could be super long, right? It could be maybe spanning large parts of paper, and so you want to maybe agree on which part of this process is most cumbersome or should be improved. And then you use, for example, dot voting as a technology to align on which part to focus on. And then in the next step, you choose the potential technologies that are out there to apply it for that part of the process. And that's where the cards coming into play. And I have you know, a visual presentation here. And as again, these are the cards in reality. And for each of those colors, there's like 6 or 7 detailed cards. And then they provide roughly 70 use cases where AI or machine learning could actually help, right? And that starts with simple things like an algorithm finding specific data or the relevant data. It could, you know, could be performing simple tasks. It could be visual recognition. It could be audio recognition. Could be something creation. And you see from the colors and from the topics that it starts with very kind of simple, maybe even not machine learning type of technology or algorithm, and then gets very complex until the point where the machine really kind of invests gets intelligent in some way, right? And those cards are described here in more details, right? So you have kind of a very speaking, like a kind of a description of this use case on the one side, and then some examples on the other side. And that's done in a way that it's focusing on people that are not technical, right? So they want to speak like natural language and not engineering language. So that's why it's maybe for an engineer it's super too simple or too agnostic, but just imagine that AR recruiter which has never heard of machine learning in some way, right? And this is definitely more helpful for those guys. And so you understand very quickly, okay, could this possibly help in this specific process step? And then you're going to flip through those 70 cards as a team, and every team member selects the cards that he or she thinks could match and work. And then as a final step, then you have lots of cards, of course, on top of and everybody has its own card deck. And then you're going to need to agree on which technology makes the most sense, right? So which use case do we really should focus on? And that's kind of a team discussion again, right? So everybody discusses a little bit, and then in the end, you're going to do some dot voting if there's a disagreement. And finally, you have the most important AI cards, like the technology describing that you want to use. And now the team needs to kind of write down and summarize with words what's the new process supposed to be doing. And that's, again, some kind of a teamwork that's needed here in order to describe that process in a very easy way. And so that everybody understands it. And then you're going to present your message again, and then again the team discusses this and agrees on a final concept, so to say. And again, here it's important that you have build up a team, and that's where the facilitator comes into play, that prepares that event, which is usually us or our friends from 33A, to make sure that you have kind of a good group of people in the room that can actually look at this process from different angles. Yeah, and you finally end up with kind of a solution that, of course, could influence not just this one specific process step, but also maybe steps afterwards or before, right? So you want to make sure that once you have that one part of the process adjusted and enabled by machine learning technology, you also look at this holistically again and kind of see whether there's anything that you can maybe not do anymore, because now the machine learning is kind of automating this. And then finally, of course, you might want to give it a catchy name, but that's optional, right? Summing it up, just to kind of show this, the rest of the steps at which I omitted here. Of course, you need to now also look into testing and feasibility, because if the engineers now look at this, it's nice that there is some HR people and maybe some managers looking into automating a process, but they probably don't necessarily have a clue around, is the data available, is the data normalized, how much does it actually take to get the data, is it, is there enough data to actually train a system properly so that it provides accurate results, that the automation is also doing a good job and not just automating and lots of errors. And so this is what you do in the user test, and then also in the assessment phase, where you not just look at this from a technical perspective, trying to understand what's the effort behind and the feasibility, but also looking at at this topic from an ROI perspective, because not always machine learning is the right tool to solve the problem, right? There might be easier ways to do that. Like if the effort is pretty high and the ROI and the benefit is good, but it's not it's not good enough to actually argument for the high effort, then you might want to not do this in the end, right? So that's important. And also here, the canvas that is provided with the AI design sprint gives you some kind of a structure to actually do that in the proper way. With that, I think given the time, I only could give you kind of a little outlook. But I think what you want to take away is it's a structured approach to do something within your company, to take the domain experts, to take on their knowledge around what they actually do day in, day out, and then adjust that one together with them to actually make it more automated, more precise, more intelligent, more predictive, whatever, right? There's 70 use cases most of us actually don't know, and this approach gives you a structured way to actually identify that in a very quick way. And that's what I think is super powerful. If you're interested and to know more, happy to take some more time, walk you through and test this out. Again, this tool works pretty much like this is the business model canvas or the value proposition canvas is kind of a tool you can actually obtain and a license. We're just the facilitators. 33A are the company that actually developed this, which are friends of us. By the way, also run AI Monday in Copenhagen. And we're happy to also connect you to those guys if you're interested. So with that, thanks so much. Yeah, and if you're interested on what Taival is doing as well, I can take some more time also later on in the networking areas.
Thank you, Juri. There's one question in Slido, and I think you just answered it very, very briefly in one of your last sentences here. You said on the different AI design sprint version slides, you briefly mentioned somebody who developed the original concept. Could you repeat who developed which version?
So the company is called 33A, and it's Jonas and Mike from our friends from Copenhagen. 33A.ai, I think is the website, check out their website. They have tons of more information around it, and I can also connect you to those guys if you're interested to know more.
Maybe if you have, I'm talking now to the audience, if you have further questions, please ask or put the questions into Slido. In the meantime, I have one question, Juri.
Yeah.
So I will always wonder, I mean, from whom does the initiative come from? I mean, who identifies the need of using AI to, I don't know, to strengthen certain processes? So if you hear something in the background, that's just my kids, don't worry. So my question is it something that you have to sell hard as a consultant, as a consultancy to companies that they start seeing the potential of AI or using AI methods, or is it do you see more companies that already have identified their problems and they're now looking actively for solutions using AI technologies? I mean, what is currently more in the business? I mean, sorry, I start my question again. I'm a little bit lost here with the kids. So the question is when you think about your clients, have they already identified the problems that they want to tackle with AI, or and then they come to you, or is this way more the other way around, that you really have to work with them to identify the problems they have and where you could then actually use AI technologies?
Out of my perspective, it's both, right? So I've been in touch with, specifically also engineering teams, which really know well what problems they have, and where potentially machine learning approaches could help automating stuff, right? Which then rather have the problem around finding the right experts, providing them with the insights on solving that, right? Because it's usually then more around kind of getting a good model being trained, or getting access to the right data, or all those type of things, right? But then you have also, and that's what I encountered myself, is you have a group of people that are actually process experts, domain experts, right? They're not engineers. They do operational work or quality work, kind of process managers in that sense. And those people are not super familiar with what's possible, but they also already had a glimpse. And those type of discussions are usually a little bit painful if because they're kind of lacking that right approach, right? So they're either trying to get some AI expert into this room, kind of saying, can you help us identifying this? And that's where I think the AI design sprint helps a lot, because it kind of gives this whole discussion kind of a structured approach and a frame, and how to follow that. Similar, like, business develop, business model development, right? So then the design, the business model design canvas helps. If you think about value proposition, the value proposition canvas helps, right? So type of canvases are just tools to structure your thinking and the approach you're going to solve those issues. But I think it's both, right? And I think from our perspective, the majority, like larger companies, usually have more ability to actually have hire engineers trying to kind of look into this AI angle more focusly, like, and so they less have an issue to kind of use that AI design sprint in the first place. I think it's also, but as I said, it's depending on which group wants to actually look into automation, and usually the process managers and process improvement guys are lacking this kind of technical knowledge and approach, and that's where it's supposed to be landing. But it's not something that is easy to be sold from consulting perspective, because it requires a lot of explanation and showcasing, and that's why I kind of also choose the chance here to kind of present this, because I want to get some feedback on how this works, how this resonates with the audience.
Okay, looking at the time, I would suggest that we try to answer the remaining questions in let's say in the social networking part of this event, if you're okay with it, Juri. And then I would hand over to Philip and Rasmus, because Philip has prepared some questions for Rasmus, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Andreas. Yeah, well, I'm very happy to introduce Rasmus Rothe now, who will talk about the upcoming AI Campus Berlin. And later we'll talk about how they drive AI innovation at Merantix. Most of you will know Rasmus, but a few words anyway. He studied computer science at Oxford, Princeton, and the ETH Zurich, obtained a PhD in computer vision and deep learning. He's one of the founding members of the KI Bundesverband, the Federal Association for AI in Germany. So if you're working on AI and you're not a member yet, you might want to consider joining. And of course, he's the founder of Merantix, the AI company builder, which he's taking now one huge step further with the upcoming AI Campus Berlin. Rasmus, thank you very much for taking the time. How is the sleep just 1 week before the opening?
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. So there are a lot of problems you encounter when you have a physical space versus when you just deal with digital assets and software. So, still bringing the lightning in, making sure the internet works, just kind of the last mile things. So yeah, very, very intense time at the moment. So, but also very happy to give a sneak preview of what we plan on the AI campus. And also please feel free to join the German AI Association. We started 3 years ago. We are actually surpassed 300 members just a few days ago. So if you're not a member yet and want to connect with the AI Association and the AI scene, please let us know. So yeah, today I'm talking about the AI campus. I will actually keep it very brief, just to give you a 5-minute sneak preview. So the idea basically started kind of from back when we were working on Merantix as the main project. So at Merantix, we built companies. We are incubating them, we're financing them, we've started a few product companies, and from day one, all these companies have always been co-located because we just believe very much in the ecosystem approach and also the knowledge exchange between companies. And so when we were looking for a new office, we were basically thinking, okay, if we anyways move to a new office, why don't we think this a bit bigger and also kind of open this up for the wider ecosystem, because there's a lot of very interesting stuff happening in Berlin in terms of AI, in terms of startups, research, but also larger corporates doing stuff. And I think, you know, we don't have to hide internationally, even though, but like, yeah, I think it's just like very fragmented over the city. And so I think bringing that together in one space just adds a lot of value. And so that's where basically the idea started from. And I think it also stems from, in general, like the fact that, you know, we have leading research here. I mean, you know, Andreas is here from DFKI. We've probably the most researchers per capita if you compare ourselves with the US and China. But like, if you look at the funding in terms of startup, venture capital, but also private equity, we're very much behind. And I think this is partially also because there are too few startups, obviously also too little funding, but I think we need to just do much more on the startup side to really bring AI products out and to kind of catch up. And I think the part is we basically have all the parts here. So if you think about Europe or Germany, you know, we have great research. We have in many industries like the leading companies here. So I mean, SAP is on the call. We have the car manufacturers. We have a lot of companies in the pharma industry, in the health tech space, in the manufacturing space. So there's a lot of domain knowledge and a lot of like industry leaders. And we also have great talent here. And we have also a lot of people actually specifically who want to move to Berlin. So I think kind of all the ingredients is there, but I think like we're still a bit too siloed in those different scenes, and startups are very well connected with each other and research is very well connected and corporates are, but like in between, I think we still need to do more. And I think that's ultimately important to do AI transfer. And so that's pretty much the idea of the AI campus, to create a physical space where we bring all these stakeholders together. So you have a connection to research, you have a place where talent likes to work, you have leading industry companies that moving in. You have also proximity to regulators, also to investors, and really have this one space. And so that's basically what we're doing with the AI campus. So I will now show you actually a quick video of the construction site from around 3 weeks ago. So we actually then secured a building in Berlin Mitte, which has more than 5,000 square meters, 5,500 square meters. It's a new building that is being built right now, and the goal is basically to bring everybody together. So yeah, I'll give you a sneak preview. We're moving in actually April 1st, so next week, Thursday, and so far everything is on track. We're gonna get the keys next week. So you see on the video, there's obviously still some work to do, but again, that was a few weeks ago. Yeah, so we are ready to open April 1st. One of the core elements of the campus is actually, besides offices for between 9 and 45 people per company and some open desks, there's going to be an 800 square meter community space that is allows you to connect, also host events. There's also a lecture theater we can use for up to 300 people. But I think this community space is really about like bringing everybody in the campus together and to ultimately exchange our knowledge, but also to obviously do business with each other. And I think the other part is to also in Berlin create a showcase room in the end for very concrete AI applications. You see some more pictures. These are renderings from the community space. I mean, the community space basically now finished. We actually have already checked that space. That's done. Now we're just needing putting all the furniture in the next couple of days. And that will all go live, next week, Thursday. Lots of meeting rooms and like shared phone booths and other shared facilities. And overall, also very diverse and interesting network of partners, but also residents. And there's also more coming. So I think this just gives you an overview of who's involved. Some of them, like with SAP also, we're going to work on some enterprise AI programs to kind of build the connection there with SAP, and also to see how startups can collaborate there with SAP and also be closer to maybe some of the problems they see with their customers. There are companies like Evonik moving to the AI campus. There's also another tier one actually who's signing today, who's gonna a tier one automotive supplier who's very known, who's gonna move on the campus. There's some research partnerships with, like also the Technical University in Darmstadt with DFKI, and then a lot of startups. So there's, for example, in the retail space, there's like Signatrix or Advertima, who are kind of in the autonomous checkout space. There's cleanup and like the recycling fraud prediction space. There's Super AI that is rethinking kind of the whole data labeling space. There's SeisMe that is kind of more on the fashion retail application of AI. Similar also Neuros, very interesting company in the visual search space. There's Neuro, which is more kind of with the brain interface. So, very diverse companies there. Probably will add like another 6 or 7 logos in the next 10 days. So, keep you updated. I mean, it's right now around a bit more than 2/3 at capacity. So we're already filling up despite Corona. I think a lot of companies are also rethinking their office concept because they realize they don't need like their big single office, but they rather want maybe a small office, but like really a community where they can also collaborate. And, there will also be lots of events. So just in April and May, we have a couple of very interesting tech talks that are happening. We will have a regular paper discussion groups that are much more in detail, really focused on discussing individual papers and research. The companies also on the campus obviously will introduce each other. So there will be a lot of stuff happening even from the beginning onwards. I guess there will be like 2 to 3 things per week. Stuff happening on the campus, but obviously also for people from outside of the campus who are not residents there to kind of join. And super excited. Actually, just today at 5 p.m., we put the new website online. So if you want to read more about the campus, what's going on, who's there, how to get involved, come on our website. We just put it online. It's much more information now. And like just sign up for the newsletter and hope to see you there soon. And if you also interested, obviously, in moving in or partnering, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I can't wait to see it all in real life soon, hopefully. Just because you mentioned companies redesigning their offices, I wonder, you also mentioned the big community space throughout this whole Corona time now. Has there been any redesign of the original plans? Did you make the community space bigger or
Yeah, I think, like we actually did a lot of the planning in the first lockdown, like a lot of the detailed like planning on the campus. And I think we realized that people really like the home office, but we also realized, and that also what we realized with the Merantix, that for kind of like more collaboration, interaction, maybe also teams that have different backgrounds, this like kind of physical meeting is still very important. And so the campus was very much built about the collaboration. And so that's why, actually we put a lot of thought into how can we make this 800 square meter community space so that, or connection space, how we call it, so that, people also randomly meet each other. For example, we have one thing, there's one big coffee machine, coffee barista area for everyone from the campus. And usually you would probably put several, but we want everybody to come to the connection space and to also randomly interact there. And there's also different ways of, organizing, I guess, smaller meetings, larger meetings, workshops, even like 50 people, like meetups in that connection space. And it's very modular built. So there's a lot of kind of detailed thinking we put into this to make it work.
Great. Well, something I'm most interested in, of course, is why you chose Berlin, or like what made you pick Berlin as a city, as a location?
Yeah, I mean, we were both in Switzerland actually before, but we realized that Berlin is just also kind of midterm very interesting from a talent perspective. I mean, both because there's great research here locally, but also there's a vibrant startup ecosystem. And I think what's been most helpful is it's pretty English speaking by now, so also and very attractive also overseas. So we've been able to also bring a lot of people to Berlin. I think like 70% or 80% of the people who work in Merantix, some of the companies, we are around 100 people now, didn't work in Berlin before. So they either moved from other cities in Germany or even, somewhere in Europe or even outside of Europe to Berlin. And so I think that has been like, very instrumental for us to attracting really good talent to kind of be here in Berlin. And for then, it was for us also kind of very natural, like all our teams are here to build the campus here in Berlin. So yeah.
You kind of mentioned this already earlier in your presentation, but just to elaborate on this, in your vision, what's going to be the role of the campus in the AI ecosystem in Berlin?
Yeah, I mean, like we see it as in the end, a platform like everybody can use for whatever it helps them. So I think in the AI ecosystem, so for example, some AI startup or some AI team on the campus wants to start a new like expert group on, I don't know, NLP, NLU, or wants to focus like maybe like a regular series on retail and AI. They can also use this facility to kind of host events or to just meet and bring a critical mass together. And I think the good thing is that on the campus, you have already more than 500 people at max capacity. I mean, right now, again, we are at around 2/3 that is interested in the topic. And so you already, for I guess any topic around AI, you always have a critical mass of a few people at least who are, even for a very deep expert topic, are interested in that. And I think that's super valuable. So I think it's hopefully a good like also physical space to exchange. It's also a good space to do business. I think there's a lot of opportunity for one startup maybe selling to another startup or selling to a corporate their products. There's also, I think, a lot of potential in terms of lead sharing. So if you think about startups, just kind of once they build a more trusted relationship, also openly sharing what customers they interact with, because like, there's for one customer, also the product of another startup might be interesting. And I think that is very much like business generating. And you could also do like public research projects. I think for some of these larger consortia, I mean, usually also have several companies involved. And so that's why I think the bridge to research is also super important, which is maybe less on the campus, but at least having strong connection there so that you could also, go into one of these national or European research projects. And then maybe with DFKI, with Hessian AI, with like, some of the corporates, some of the SMEs and some of the startups, you can then like do something together. So I think that's where it should all, like people shouldn't see it as an office, but more like an environment that can drive their business. That's the way we think about it, and that's also how we think about it. Like the whole thing is a not-for-profit. I mean, it's basically covering costs once it's like at close to max capacity. But obviously, we also see value in like co-locating with interesting companies and doing business with them and helping each other.
Mm-hmm. For that to work, I guess there's a door policy, right? I mean, like, how do you decide who gets in and who doesn't? What are the criteria?
Yeah, I think, I mean, like one is like there needs to be some connection to data, machine learning, AI, and I think, it could also be a company that has a lot of interesting data and hasn't done that much yet, but wants to build like a new team in that space. I think for some of the corporates also, you will see some more logos in the next 2 weeks. That has been also a big driver that they said, look, like we are, for us, it's been hard to attract top AI talent because we have not this, we are competing with startups, but that way you get like the best of both worlds. You have like the kind of a more startup environment on the AI campus, but you still have the, cushy corporate environment and benefits and everything, and also the impact you can drive in a corporate. And I think that's also the reason why some of the larger companies have been moving on there. Yeah, so.
Okay, well, thank you. Looking at the time, I'd just like to move over to talking a little bit more about how you at Merantix drive AI innovation. You're in the business of business models. From where do you take your ideas?
Yeah, it's very different sources. So we work with founders in residence for 6 to 12 months and test a lot of different ideas, and we actually don't very much care where it comes from, because in the end that's only like 1% or probably even less of a successful business. So, and usually it doesn't come also from a single source, usually it comes from a few different sources. So there might be some progress in research. So example, we're now starting a new venture that is using natural language processing in the regulatory space. And so there's been a lot of progress in the research space and language processing, NLU, NLP, as you might know. So that has been like one driver, that we look generally into more models that, you know, involve a lot of text. And the other part is that with with Merantix Labs, we are also doing a lot of industry projects for customers, and there we've seen some trends in the regulatory space, some demand for certain products. And so then that kind of was baked into an idea, and then we started validating that idea, and then at some point spin it off. So yeah, it's usually a combination. It can come from industry, it can come from other startups we see, it can come from research, it can come sometimes from advisors, sometimes it's just some random ideas we have, but usually it's a combination of all of them.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a bit on how you choose those ideas and how you validate them after?
Yeah, we think in terms of validation in a few directions. So the first one is we want to see, is there commercial traction, or can we generate commercial traction? And we try to actually validate that before we write a line of code. So we go out to potential customers and really try to understand their pain points, their willingness to pay, and ideally even sign like already 3 to 5 LOEs, letter of intents, with potential customers that say, hey, look, like if you can deliver feature set ABC, we would pay like, you know, X per year. That's on the commercial side. On the technical side, depends a bit what the case is. For some, we tend to build some prototypes, or we try to do some stuff on data if we really believe there is some risk that it can't work. I think for most of the stuff we go into, we try to not take too much science risk. So usually we're pretty confident that we can make something work. And if not, then we rather try to strip down the feature set and try to then validate on our commercial side. And then I think another thing we look at is the general like funding landscape in that space. So also for follow-up rounds, I mean, we can invest, you know, between 1 and 3 million euros per company, which will certainly finance the company for quite a bit at the beginning. But we also look at kind of the long-term trends, and, you know, there are certain spaces where just VCs like to fund more than in others. And that could be by industry, by business model, by also kind of like, and it can change quite a lot from year to year. That some spaces are hotter than others, and I think that's also in the end very important for follow-up rounds.
Sorry, I had to find the button here. What areas will you invest into in the next months? Is there anything you can share?
Yeah, I think like one is this NLP RegTech case. I think we want to do more in language. We're looking at one fintech model right now. We have one other model in the healthcare space. I think generally, yeah, we're very interested in what's happening in natural language processing. We're very interested in healthcare in general and biotech. So anything in that direction. Yeah, pretty industry agnostic, I would say. Like sometimes also things come up very randomly, and it also depends a bit what founders we bring in. So the way it works is we bring in individual founders and ideate with them, and then once we have an idea, we try to find the right co-founders, because we believe based on the idea, the founding team needs to look very differently, because you want to have very deep expertise for whatever you need, and whether it's technical or domain expertise in a certain industry. And so that way, like also sometimes the founders we bring on board determine a bit what fields we go into.
Okay, just to switch over or change perspective and looking at the application side, or like at the client side as well, what changes would you suggest for SMEs to take to make use of machine learning? Because I mean, this is like one of the main areas where we you know, see potential in Germany. Is there any takeaways?
Yeah, I think I think the challenge is that also the term SME or Mittelstand is like a broad spectrum of companies in terms of also their readiness for machine learning and AI. So we see some that are ridiculously advanced, like in a very, very sophisticated, have already in-house teams and very much at the state of the art. And then they have others where there's still like a few steps of digitalization to be done in terms of even just doing the first digital things. I think that makes it super challenging. So yeah, I think in general, just making them more aware of what's possible. I think for many of them, they want a very clear ROI. So there's little, or there's also less willingness to invest too much upfront. So I think being very clear on like, if you invest like X, Y is your return, and this is, much larger than you invest. Yeah, and then also just checking that the readiness is there. If they first need to collect data and do the one-on-one, then there's no point in thinking about like machine learning and AI. Yeah, and so also connecting them with each other, I guess, like making use cases that were successful, like very prominent, and maybe also having the SMEs share them with their peers in their regions so that they can learn from each other how they were managing a machine learning project.
Okay, one last question. We're all working remotely now. We are on an online event here today. We look forward to our online networking in a few minutes. How important is a local AI ecosystem for innovation still?
I think it's super important. I think people will do focused work from home in the future, and like people like working from home. And I think also, there will be a lot of events that are online. But I think at the same time, people still, for knowledge exchange, for building trust also with each other, to share very openly also what doesn't go well. I think you still want to meet physically and build and see each other more frequently than like every 6 months on a Zoom call. And so having these local ecosystems, I think, is super important. And I think we see that also with our own companies, but also all the companies now moving on the campus. I think there is a pretty, very few believe in fully remote, and very few believe in like everything on site. I think everybody's hybrid, and some are more on the remote side and some are more on the on-site side. But I think, we will certainly not go back to what has been before the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. I certainly can't wait to meet you all in person. Thank you, Rasmus, again for your time. And looking at the clock, I don't know, do we have some questions, or should we move?
So we don't have any questions in the Slido, as I think, or at least I can't see them. But allow me one comment. So if I understood it correctly, you will have a theater, an audience room for like 300 people. So I know exactly where we'll have the first AI Monday after the pandemic. So I invite ourselves to your campus.
No, sorry, the internet connection was just broken. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, let's host it on the campus. I mean, we can do it. I mean, we will already be there April 1st. So
let's hope that towards I don't know, autumn, late summer events might be possible again.
Yeah.
All right. Let's maybe hand over to Juri for the closing remarks and the invitation over to the other platform.
Yeah. I think you mentioned one good point. So the next AI Mondays, check out our website, aimonday.de. We usually try to make sure that all the events are up and running there. So have a look. The next one definitely is with our friends from Porsche and Porsche Digital on April 12th. So we're going to focus on the question around how AI can actually improve company processes, specifically with an industry focus, right? So Porsche will show Porsche Digital and will show some of their cases. We have Tobias Oberrauch coming from the KI Bundesverband, I think, and we also have ML6 from Belgium, actually, a company that's quite strong in that space, specifically for industries as well, and they show some use cases. So super exciting agenda again. Mark your calendars. You can actually, I think, already sign up on Eventbrite for those. So looking forward to see you after Easter. Definitely virtual if I look at the numbers right now. And with that, I already posted also the link into the chat here. You can also use, again, fancy QR codes. But I also created a little short code URLs. If you there's 3 choices, but we would like to continue to have a kind of a discussion one-to-one with you. And we chose WonderMe, the platform. If you haven't checked it out, it's super cool. There will be kind of a little room, and you will create yourself a little avatar, and then you can actually click with the mouse through the room. And if you're getting close to somebody else, there is a little circle closing around you, and then you can actually start a conversation. So the camera gets on, and your microphone gets on, and then you have this conversation. If you feel this is done, then you're gonna go somewhere else, like in a physical room. So we're trying to get at least some kind of a feeling around networking and what the event usually is. With that, thanks so much. I also